I think that there's something about shepherding opportunity that's in front of you to be able to have impact on people's lives is both a calling, but also exciting.
You're listening to What Fuels You, where we deep dive with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to learn more about their stories and uncover nuggets of wisdom we can all use. I'm your host, Shauna Swerland, CEO of Fuel Talent, an award-winning recruiting firm based in Seattle. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is James Lazarovits, PhD. James is the CEO and co-founder of Archon Biosciences, a leader at the intersection of materials engineering and artificial intelligence. James brings over 15 years of experience building, mentoring, and investing in deep tech startups across AI, software, hardware, and robotics. Before founding Archon, James was at the forefront of AI-driven computational protein design as a post-doctoral fellow and later research faculty at the Institute for Protein Design at the University of Washington, under the direction of 2024 Nobel Laureate David Baker. There, he contributed to pioneering methods that integrate machine learning and molecular engineering to create next-gen therapeutic proteins. James earned his PhD in nanotechnology engineering from the University of Toronto, where he worked under nanomedicine expert Dr. Warren Chan. His doctoral work focused on overcoming biological delivery barriers using nanomaterials and deep learning, laying the groundwork for his later contributions to rational protein design. Welcome, Jamie. I like how we have James in the bio. It's like business in the front, party in the back. Jamie's party guy. I'm just kidding.
I've grown up a little bit from my university days.
Yeah. It's crazy because I feel like, we've talked and I feel like you're like super accessible and chill and just like normal guy, but you're clearly operating on another spectrum. As I was prepping for this podcast, I'm like, I got to look up half the things I'm prepping for. I'm like, what does that? The world is changing so quickly and you're right at the epicenter. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's a very exciting time to be at this convergence of artificial intelligence and biotherapeutics.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I'm psyched to learn more, but I'm first going to hit you with some rapid fire. I know that you are a world traveler, and I'm curious if you're all about mountains or ocean.
Maybe both. I would say that I probably am actually more attracted to X factor, and that tends to go more in line with people. So I love finding remote places to go to, but it tends to surround culture and interacting with people. So if it's like an ocean community or a mountain community, I kind of like to go out of my way to be able to, try and experience something as different as possible to my day-to-day life.
I love that. And I want to hear about your trip that you got back from, but I'm going to keep going. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Lack of common decency. It's something that my girlfriend and I would say I'm a pretty even keel person, but a lack of common decency is certainly something that gets under my skin.
Like the two of you relate on the fact that like when you see that, you're like, this is unacceptable.
Yeah, because it's the I think the least amount of effort you can do to be decent to someone else.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
can't even do that, then I think it shows a lot about who you are.
What's that saying? There's some big saying, and I always, of course, mess these things up, but it was something like, in a world of blah, 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 be kind. I can't remember what the saying is and who even said it, but it's so basic. And it's like, yeah, let's just fucking be kind. Like, it's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that we spend a lot of time on here with, ensuring that we have a healthy culture at work is that there's some things that take very little effort to do, but you actually have long-term benefits. And if you neglect that, then ultimately it ends up hurting you a lot more in the long run. And so that's where common decency actually goes a lot further than you think.
I agree. Totally. What is your favorite thing about living in Seattle?
The accessibility to nature. I feel like I'm somebody who tries to practice gratefulness a lot because probably in my day-to-day life I have this notion where it's never enough, and the fact that we can work on such incredible technology and then leave and be in such close proximity to natural beauty is something that constantly shocks me and inspires me. I'm from Toronto, so it's not nearly as as pretty as it is here. So the fact that we have
Yeah,
such great accessibility to beautiful nature while also doing incredible science and technology truly is a unique thing to have here.
I agree, especially in the summertime right now. Makes total sense. If you could excel at something instantly outside of your field, what would it be?
Be a polyglot, being able to speak multiple languages. My grandfather spoke 10 languages,
What?
and the ability to communicate with people in their mother tongue, I think, is one of the most interesting things because you're able to connect with them in a way that you can't really without doing that. So if I could go and speak 10 languages right now, I would
I like
hit
that
that in an instant.
answer. I think about this kind of stuff a lot, and I've never thought of that, but I know that it's something that's lacking that drives me crazy because I'm a total like people person also. And I love that answer. Wait, why did he speak 10 languages?
When you grow up in rural communities in the Czech Republic, you're in the middle of so many different areas, and that was a big thing pushed on him. So I think English was his sixth language. So it was pretty interesting that that was the only language that I knew him in, but it was his sixth.
And do you speak any other languages?
I speak French and Spanish.
Okay, well, you're ahead of most Americans, three. That's very cool. What's
Yeah.
something that you have read or watched recently that stuck with you or that you've recommended to others?
I mean, recently I rewatched The Sopranos,
I love The Sopranos.
which was great. I'm very much like a dialogue focused consumer of media. So for me, when you have very high quality writing, that kind of becomes an uncompromising aspect of being able to watch a show. And if I don't get that, then
Yeah.
I have developed a very unhealthy tendency, which a lot of people around me dislike, is that I would sooner stop watching and read the Wikipedia so I can get to the end and figure out what happens than actually consume the television
Yeah, you're a
program.
bottom line net kind of guy. There's no problem with that. You're like, life is short. I don't get these hours back. I don't need to waste them. Not into it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then so I've been also reading a lot of sci-fi recently because one of the big criticisms of me is that I mostly read history or biographies or technical books, and they tend to be dry and not I guess working on the more creative side of my brain. So my girlfriend,
Who's criticizing you for that?
oh, I mean, it's just more like, wouldn't it be nice if you were able to not have to be so intense about things and you could be more playful with the things that
Yeah.
you read or the things that you consume. So I've actually really enjoyed reading it. So if, like, for example, I was recently in Hawaii and the book that I brought was Sleepwalkers, which I think is a fascinating book, but it's how Europe sleptwalked into the First World War. And it's like the cultural interdependencies of how we ended up there. And again, I think that there's this really
I feel like we're sleepwalking now in
yeah.
America.
But again, this is like the really interesting aspect, just like why I'm interested in learning how to speak multiple languages, is that, how we treat each other and how we engage with one another actually has profound downstream consequences. And
Ugh, yeah.
this is a really interesting take on, why it ended up there. And then at the same time, it's been really fun just reading, not necessarily mindless sci-fi, but at the same time, it does become a little bit easier when you've had a long day at work and you're not, reading about
Yeah.
crises in Serbia from 150 years
Totally.
ago.
And it's hard because you're an achiever type. And so I'm guessing that you're always in the like, I want to be learning and growing and developing and stay curious. And it almost probably feels indulgent to just like watch Sopranos or read sci-fi. But I think that's probably pretty good
It's
advice.
it's why I've struggled with finding the appropriate sport to do as I get older, because I did very different sports when I was younger and my body can't do that anymore. And so now it's figuring out how
Yeah.
to do things that don't.
Pickleball.
Yeah, the problem is like I'm like, so I did competitive Muay Thai for like 12 years. So it's like a type of boxing. And there was something really nice about being able to do a sport that was like highly independent. You'd get instant gratification, instant feedback based on like how
Yeah.
much time and effort you put into it. And it was like very high paced and intense. And that's something that, at least as you get a little bit older, I tore my calf a couple of years ago. And that was a pretty good indicator that maybe explosive sports are not something that I should be doing
Yeah.
right now.
I don't really have another idea. I mean, I guess some sort of other like Tai Chi or something.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Who's someone that's alive or even someone that's passed on that you would love to have dinner with? Such a common question. I think I know your answer, but I'm just curious.
Do you think you know my answer? What do you
Hmm.
think my answer is?
I think it would be your dad because when we talked, that stood out to me as somebody that really had a profound impact on you. And it might be something bigger like Albert Einstein or something, or maybe it's someone alive. But I don't know. For some reason, that's what came to me.
Yeah, I think that there's the kind of like raw aspect of me as Jamie. I feel that being able to have a conversation with my father would be something that, yeah, would be a really incredible thing to be able to do. But there's, my dad, certainly my maternal grandfather, who had a huge impact on my life after my father died. And then there's just fascinating, multifaceted, like scientists and entrepreneurs. I mean, maybe someone even crazy like Nicholas Tesla, if let's say we're not going to go down the emotional route. But I think,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely having another conversation with my father would be a very nice thing to be able to have.
I'm sure. I want to get through this rapid fire because I'm so excited to ask you so many questions. But are you an early bird or a night owl?
I am definitely an early bird. Yeah. So
Yeah,
wake,
early to bed. So you're early to bed, or you just don't get a lot of
I don't get a
sleep?
lot of sleep. I don't get a lot of sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah. When I was younger, I was a little bit more intense. So I thought that I had a lot more control over my body than I did. And I was doing work in China remotely and then doing work in Toronto. And so I tried to see if I could work hard enough to do away without sleep. So I'd sleep a couple hours a night and my hair started to fall out. So I realized that maybe I wasn't as robust as I thought.
yeah. The way you're speaking is like, first of all, I know that I'm a lot older than you and that you in my mind are young
Yeah.
and then you keep talking about when you're younger
Yeah.
and I'm just guessing that like years for you are like multiple years because you pack so much in.
Yeah.
So it feels like that, like you're living a very full life,
Yeah.
which I love. Are you a coffee drinker or tea
It's
drinker?
coffee.
Coffee all day. So you're in the right city,
I'm in the
Seattle.
right city. Yeah.
I love it. So tell me about Toronto. I know you grew up there. How would you describe just overall your childhood? Positively, negatively, like what were you into?
So because my family is very international, a lot of my upbringing really was surrounded around travel and exposure to things. I chat with my mom at least based on how she views the impact of her parenting style or my parents' impact on their parenting style on like the type of people that my siblings and I grew up to be. And I think a big aspect of it was that we were certainly raised to be able to freely question, and that our ability to do things really hung on our ability to ask for it. So essentially, I think when I was like 8 years old was probably the last time I had a birthday party because my mom was like, "Okay, if you want to have a birthday, go ahead and do it." And I'm someone that even to this day suffers from not celebrating even the small things. And certainly growing up, my mom's like, "Okay, whatever you want, we can go set up the party, but if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it." So my childhood was very much, revolved around these ideas where if you wanted something, you should go work for it and find it. And that became a really great aspect of how I was raised, because I think the first time I traveled alone, I was 7 years old, and I flew by plane to probably meet my cousins somewhere in France by myself, and that kind of brought this whole journey that I've gone on of just really being able to just act to get what I want and do what I want. But it's
I
really
like that parenting style. What about questioning authority or questioning religion or questioning,
certainly, I think
a
questioning
teacher?
authority was probably a part that I probably could have been a little bit better at. The best relationship I had growing up was with my grade 5 teacher, Ms. Todd, who I think ended up getting let go for being too stern with her students. But I thought that she was a pretty extraordinary teacher because that's what I needed. I needed somebody who could really push back, but she was also very authentic and really wanted what was best for the kids. And so there was always this dichotomy between me trying to find how strong or how much like a teacher could take, which meant that I did very well in school, but I wasn't necessarily well liked by my teachers.
Yeah, I was a total rule follower, but like kind of almost like a kiss ass. And I'm sure that if I was maybe going to be like an A minus student, could be like an A plus just from that little extra. And then, I've got kids now, three, and they're a little bit more like push the teacher. And I found at first I was like uncomfortable with it. And then I'm like actually really proud of them because if they have questions, they're pushing it. And it's like, no, like maybe that's not right, or there's a different way of thinking. And so I love hearing that. Were you always, I'm guessing, like curious about everything? Was there any sort of specific interest in science?
I mean, from a very young age, I was to the dissatisfaction of my family, always finding things throughout the house and creating potions and science experiments and causing problems there. Certainly lighting a few things on fire, which my brother and I definitely enjoyed doing. So certainly from a
Yeah.
young age was like very experimental, very much learned by doing.
How many siblings are there?
I'm a middle child, so I've got an older brother and a younger sister.
Nice. So you don't have the middle child thing.
Oh, my so the thing is that anything bad that I do pales in comparison to my older brother. So my brother went to military boot camp at 14. And so I
Oh,
was at
yeah.
least smart enough to learn what not to do. And so I'm
Yeah.
kind of in this interesting place because I was quite young when my brother left home. I have both middle child energy, but also a little bit of like older child because it was just my younger sister, mom, and I at home.
Interesting. And did your brother turn it around
Yeah.
or did that military school work?
Yeah, no, he certainly turned it around. Flies private jets now.
Oh, that's
Lives a
cool.
pretty cool life. But certainly, I like to joke that he's me without a filter. And then people are like, well, you don't have a filter, and so I
It's
think
all relative. They
he's
meet
always
you and
doing a
they
little
think
bit
you're one
more.
way.
Yeah,
That's funny. I know people are like, you're so extroverted. And I'm like, I really am. I'm like, but you haven't met my
yeah,
brother. He's a whole nother level.
it's all
It is
relative.
interesting how the sibling dynamics work. So he was somebody that, and your fifth grade teacher, your brother, there's lots of people around you that were shaping you. Would you describe yourself as being ambitious? And if so, was it to get like rewards or success or money? Like what was kind of fueling you or driving you as a kid?
I just always wanted to be the best. I was just hyper competitive. I remember in primary school, my teachers had to have a conversation with my parents about my unhealthy work ethic. And I wanted to be better. And so like there were fifth graders or sixth graders doing more complex math than I was. And so I didn't like the fact that someone was better than I was. So I needed to work harder. But then,
Yeah.
that could manifest in a really nice way or in a really bad way, like me quitting hockey because I wasn't as good as Steve Eiserman, and I didn't want to do something if I was mediocre.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's hard to push people when they're young to do things that they're not good at. And then you talk about repetition and the amount of hours it takes to get confident and good at something. Are you past that now where you're comfortable being uncomfortable? You have to be.
Yeah, now it's a little bit more of an addiction. So it's not quite that I was uncomfortable being uncomfortable. I think it was just more that, often you end up doing things that you have natural proclivities for, but then, you ultimately have to put in the time to do that. And I
Yeah,
think now I'm just far happier or more understanding that you actually have to put in the time in order to do a good job or to be great at something.
totally. Is there something that you've done that you're like, God, I wish I was good at this and I just suck at it?
For me, I mean, I was pretty frustrated when I just came back from Peru in the sense that when I lived in Peru in my early 20s, my Spanish was so good. And now it's just not as good. So again, I mean, the feeling of not liking to be average has stayed. And so if it's something that I care
Yeah.
about, I'm not great at it. That frustrates me, but that now motivates me to work harder as opposed to pull back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if you decide to eventually get married, settle down, and have kids, how you show up as a dad
Yeah.
in that way. Like, is mediocre okay for like your offspring, you know? It's interesting when you talk to people who are so high achieving and driven like you, how that manifests.
Yeah, we'll
And I
see.
know that
I
you
mean,
talked to me
I
about,
I
yeah,
mentor people a lot, and so the thing is that what I tend to do is come in a lot more hot than I think how I treat people, in the sense that I can speak to you very strongly about what I believe and how I treat myself. But I do believe that having patience and really investing in the people around you matters, and that's something that I do a lot of with the people in my life, especially those at work, where I think that kind of back to the point of common decency, you get what you invest into the system. And if you do just completely throwing people in the deep end, what you end up finding out is that you really miss out on some pretty great individuals that don't necessarily thrive under those situations.
yeah, super interesting. It's even in the recruiting space, like some people are just better interviewers than others. Or if nowadays it's another conversation around engineering and coding, but some companies, if they'll have somebody do a stand-up code exercise and that person fails or doesn't do great, but they're an incredible developer. They just do better in a collaborative team environment. How to put people in those environments to shine. Anyway, so tell me about your decision were you always clear that like college is something and like education, was that a family value, or you were like, this is a necessary means to an end? And if so, how do you see it today? Because I know you went to the University of Toronto. Was that the right choice?
So I always knew that I wanted to do something technical. That was a pretty no brainer. But the thing was is that I never really respected undergraduate education. And that kind of stems from the fact that I'm very bad at people telling me what to do. If I understand why, I'm very purpose driven. So for me, if I understand why I'm doing something, it's very easy for me to do it. But if you're just telling me to do something for the sake of doing something, which I felt were a lot of the classes that I had to take in my undergraduate education, there was almost this, visceral rejection of it. So you asked about like whether or not how I was raised caused me to be like anti-authority. And there was this anti-authoritarian streak in me where just because I was taking this class didn't mean that I wanted to do it because you told me to. And so that was something that I really had to get over.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
certainly the education piece was a big part. I like to joke and say that I failed my dad's side of the family, because if I would have become a physician, I would have been the seventh generation in our
Oh my
family.
gosh.
Um,
That's a thing. I've never even thought about it like that. Seven
yeah, I
generations of
mean, my
physicians.
however many great grandmother in Austro-Hungary in the late 1800s was a physician, which was pretty cool to think about the type of person you'd have to be in order to be a physician back then in that part of the world.
Wow, that's incredible. And were you a good student? I'm guessing so. I mean,
I,
you
I
got,
did I did well in school, but I
yeah.
wasn't necessarily liked by all teachers. So I did come to a crossroads. So I got very injured in my first year of university. I'm Canadian, so I don't go by the freshman sophomore thing. So I guess in my freshman year, I got into a very bad snowboarding accident and broke my collarbone and part of my neck. And I was on opioids for like
Ay,
4 months because my shoulder wasn't attached to my body. And so I was not in a very good place to be taking classes. So it took me a while to heal from that. Had a couple surgeries and didn't do immensely well in school, and then had to reflect on what I actually wanted in life, and then I turned it all around, did very well, and then got into my PhD program.
yeah. What did you write your dissertation on?
So it was the use of deep learning models to characterize how nanomaterials behave inside of the body. So often when you put something inside of your body, you expect it to behave the way you want it to. But your body also reacts to the thing that you've made. And we would measure how your body reacts by looking at the proteins that exist in your blood, how they attach to the surface of administered materials, and see if that interaction can give you insight into why they don't behave the way you want them to, or give you an inclination of what you could do to make them behave more in the way that you do want them to. Does that
Whoa.
make sense?
And what, I mean, ish, but I don't get the machine learning part.
So often people want a simple answer. They're like, okay, well, this is the thing that happens to your drug when you put it inside of the body, and this is why it behaves the way you want it to, or this is the way it causes it to not behave. But if you look at the amount of proteins that exist in your blood, there are thousands of different proteins that span 12 orders of magnitude. So being able to search through each one that interacts with an administered material in a different way is really an exercise in futility. You're not going to be able to look at every single thing. But what you can do is you can take these snapshots and look at the identity of how these different proteins interact with a different material at a different period of time, and begin to draw relationships between what exists at this time on material, where it goes, and then you start using that as training data for a deep learning model to see if the deep learning model can actually start building out relationships just based on probability.
Oh, interesting. Start to like recognize
Exactly.
patterns.
So it's pattern recognition without necessarily knowing why. So a lot of questions that we were asked is like, why does this happen? The problem was, at least at the time, this was like 10 plus years ago, which in the AI world is a very long time ago. We weren't necessarily equipped to start asking those questions that were more under the hood.
Yeah. Crazy. Wow. So it seems like, as I was researching you, that I would have just expected the whole background, all of your experience to be a continuation of, your PhD, but you had a chapter in finance. How did that whole thing come about? And
Uh,
how would you describe like how that matters
So
like to
that
your career
actually
now?
happened before my PhD when I was about 18 years old. So this is kind of like a childhood thing. So when you go through something really traumatic, there's these like aspects of like being a child where you're like, well, I'd never want to be in that position again. And so one of
Yeah.
the big things is that I'm okay being vulnerable, but I also don't like to be in a position where I feel weak or out of control. And so one of those aspects was, if something bad happened to me, I wanted to ensure that no matter what, I was okay. And a big aspect of that
Financially, you mean?
in general. So this is why like
Yeah.
I worked out a lot, why I, went into doing types of mixed martial arts. There was this aspect, at least growing up, that was really built off insecurity, but also at the same time, it was because in my personality, I wanted to excel. There were things in my life that I was able to identify what I was not good at. And I worked very hard in order to be good at that. So as an 18-year-old, I didn't necessarily have the amount of money that I wanted to have. But what I wanted to be able to do was have complete freedom of choice of what I wanted to do. And I didn't want money to be a deciding factor in that. So I took the money that I had allocated for school, whether that be through scholarships or some money that my family had given me, and I started investing. And so I did a lot of day trading in my late teens, and I reinvigorated a relationship with now one of my best friends, Ari, and we started day trading together as kids in our late teens. And he was building a software company, a software meets music label company in his early 20s, and I became very enamored with how he was mixing passion with business development. And so what we ended up doing was we took the money that we had made and we started finding deep tech companies that were not very good at communicating what they were doing from a business development standpoint or even just from a technical standpoint. And we
Yeah.
took our money and started investing in these very early stage deep tech startups in 2012, 2013. So we were 22 years old, just using the money that we were making and just started investing in different companies. So that really taught us a lot and taught me a lot about the power of money, the power of a story, the power of product market fit, and that guided a lot of my focus after that.
That's super cool. So, I mean, a lot of people at that age, I'm guessing you did well, would have just been kind of addicted to or gotten adrenaline from or ego boost from being a person with some money. Did that matter to you? Like when you think about success, is money part of that? I mean, there's obviously like some part of
I,
that, but
it's a huge thing that I focus on. I think it's a consequence of action. And so that's why I got pretty disillusioned with day trading, because what I realized is that there was no, I wasn't creating value. So I've always been, very ideologically driven, and it felt very nice to make money, but ultimately I never really was feeling satisfied because I didn't know whether or not the companies that we were picking were any good, whether or not the money that we were investing had any positive contribution. And what we realized was that we were far more interested in seeing what happened under the hood, and B, we actually had far longer term interests that we really wanted to connect with. So there's always an ego aspect to everything that we do, but I wasn't motivated by that. That didn't necessarily make me feel whole, and I certainly wanted more than just what that provided me.
yeah, interesting. So tell me about how you got to Seattle. Like what brought you to this area?
One of the big common threads in my life is that there are these like random chance encounters just through relationships that I've built that take me on these completely random trajectories. So my exposure to startups and investing in my teens and early 20s was because I had a friend who randomly moved a few blocks from my mom's house. And then we reconnected, and I started doing that. In my PhD, in the first year of my PhD, there was a guy who was 5 years ahead of me that we connected very well, and then he ended up leaving, and we remained really close friends. And he was very into investing and startups, science, and he had gone to the Institute for Protein Design to work with David Baker. And he had been telling me for years, this was maybe 12 years ago, that this is like the future. This is the most incredible type of science you could ever work on. You need to come here. And there was certainly this aspect of ego because I'd done well, because I'd been working with a lot of startups, because I felt that I was fiercely independent. The last thing that I ever wanted to do was academia. And so I was rejecting my friend's advancements a number of times to come to Seattle and check it out, until he finally connected me with David. And David was like, "Here, why don't you come fly out to Seattle, interview?" And it's one of those things that when you see something great in front of you, it just makes sense. And so I think it was within like 30 minutes of me being here, I just knew implicitly
Yeah.
that this was the right place to be.
And he hadn't yet even won the Nobel. Like you
No,
just
this
had
was
a
this
gut
was back
instinct on
in
him.
this was in 2018, so
Yeah.
quite a while ago. Not too long, but still quite a while ago. And you could just feel it in the air. And what's interesting is a lot of the CEOs and founders of biotechs around the Seattle area that are in protein design were that small group of people that I actually met on the weekend that I came here. So my friend co-founded Neoleukin Therapeutics, which was the company that dosed the first computationally designed protein into humans. And it was a pretty amazing thing where we all had this feeling that there was something really big about to happen, but we didn't necessarily knew at the time what that was.
Yeah. Well, I read that you described it as a feeling like the Yukon Gold Rush for science. Were people kind of talking about it in that way? Like we know something's going on here.
For
And
sure.
how did the environment shape kind of how you thought about you in the context of that environment? Were you like, hey, I'm really clear on the role I want to play? Or were you just like, I just want to be a sponge and just kind of learn as much as I can?
So the thing is that I would say both. The thing that I like to do is I like to find the best people in the room and spend as much time with them as possible to learn from them. But also at
Yeah.
the same time, I'm very intentional with how I spend my time. So I remember when I gave my interview, part of that interview was showcasing also all of this like investment and startup stuff that I did alongside the science. Because what I was always interested in was developing science with a purpose. I was always very interested in the translational piece, and it was never about the money, but it was always about the impact. It was always about what could you possibly do with extraordinary technology, with people that actually have the means and the ability to do that. So when I got there, I just spent a lot of time just spending time with different incredible people. And just by pure chance, but also about me putting myself out there, I was able to find my now co-founder, where we just really connected and it resonated and understood that what he brought to the table, I lacked, and vice versa.
This is George.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about that first conversation. Was there like a light bulb moment, or was it? I'm always curious about that. The origin story of a company. Is it like, hey, I have an idea and I have something that I want to find as far as like the gaps, and I found that person, or is it? I'm just talking to this person I respect, and we decide we want to start a company, and then we come up with the idea. Like, how did that trajectory happen in that conversation, or those following conversations?
Yeah. So we actually met at a bar. So it was somebody's going away party, and I happened to sit next to him. We were both drinking beer. I had happened to go to Japan quite frequently because my aunt had a lot of work there, and I do a lot of traveling with my family. Come from a very small family, and so we had been in Tokyo quite a lot. And because he's half Japanese and loves Japan, he was very surprised to find someone that just knew a lot about the country. And so, for the most part, we just spent a while drinking beer and talking about the things that we liked. And do that kind of like casual serendipitous interaction and engagement. What we then found was that actually we also had a lot of interesting scientific ideas under the hood, and I view it as very serendipitous, largely because that us meeting was not motivated based on finding a partner or a co-founder. I had just noticed some repetitive problems in the delivery space in my PhD, because not only was I using deep learning models to characterize how things work, but also why they don't work. And so I became very excited at the notion of using computational protein design because it allowed you to tie learning about these relationships while also building materials in a way that you just can't using any other system. And George and a few other people at the IPD had invented this really incredible technology that the moment I saw it, a light bulb went off. And I said, this actually could address a lot of the problems that I had seen in a different field in my PhD, but actually could have profound impacts in the areas that I'm very interested in.
Was he at IPD?
He was
So he was, it was just a birthday party, but like you just, we weren't working together. You were more kind of met socially, but then
just met
ironically,
socially.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And we
so,
there,
yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, yeah. It was pretty random. But then there's another person that who had been working with us. We all kind of got along very well, and they realized that I had a very different perspective to what they did. So it started off as the odd question, the odd conversation, the odd dinner hangout. So I moved to Seattle May 13th, 2019. June 1st, I officially started working with David. By October 2nd, I had quit my postdoc and went into what the IPD calls the translational program, where I then went and worked full time on developing this technology. So, in a matter of a few months, I, completely committed myself to this technology because it just made sense to
Yeah.
me.
And when you're kind of co-founding a business with someone, I've never been, I don't have any business partners. And if I did, I think with perspective, I would feel the need to have these crazy conversations because I've worked with so many startups and seen them fall apart, not because they didn't have bright people with bright ideas or, large addressable market or whatever it is, great funding, but more that the co-founders weren't aligned. Were you concerned about that at all? And if so, what approach did you take to kind of vetting each other? Was it, what do you want? What's your work ethic? What's your vision on XYZ? How do we build culture? Or were you just like, we'll figure it out?
The IPD Institute for Protein Design takes a very unique approach to translation. So there are a number of really incredible people that support the IPD, and they've created this entity called the Translational Program. So what we were awarded was essentially a startup grant that allowed us to build an academic lab within the University of Washington. We were then granted research faculty titles. So we were faculty at the University of Washington. So we didn't actually start a company immediately. What we actually started was a lab that was explicitly devoted to developing our technology. Because I hope for the best and plan for the worst, what we ended up doing was write a number of grants that we were then awarded. So we were awarded about $7 million in non-dilutive funding, where we then spent the next 3.5 years developing the technology to get it ready to be funded by investors. So during that time, it actually allowed us to build a relationship where we were able to ask the really important questions like, are we the right people to build this technology together? Are we the right people to build a company together? A lot of it is just like any other intimate relationship, if not maybe more outside of having children together, is that you're completely financially dependent on one another, and that your future is also predicated on how well that person does, and how truthful, how honest, how much they can grow. And within that time, we were really able to understand like who we were, why we were doing what we were doing, and whether or not this was actually a resilient and scalable relationship. And so what we were able to find was that over those number of years where it was a very nonlinear path to get us to where we are today, it allowed us to say, yes, like we are the right people to build this together.
Yeah. And as far as how you would describe the business then versus how you would describe the business now, has that changed?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I remember that I marked the first day that I'd say that October date where I left 3 months after starting with David. We actually pitched Madrona on my first day there, and they did not like our pitch, but they did end up funding our company. And the huge thing is so much of this is about storytelling, and what we were very fascinated by was how you put building blocks together in space, and how the spatial organization of novel structures drives biology was like the whole pitch, which is not a very clear pitch.
What you're,
And
it's a little like, what is the what?
exactly, exactly. And so that was this thing where we were very rooted in the science, and the science made sense to us. But I hadn't been there very long, and the big part was, okay, how do you articulate that? So what? So there are roots and foundations of why the technology made sense to us 5, 6 years ago, still makes sense today. But at the same time, the targets that we were looking at before are totally different. The way that we're deploying the technology is totally different.
What is the business model and what's the elevator pitch now? If you meet somebody at a cocktail party or you're traveling in Peru and someone's like, "What do you do?" What's the net?
At Archon, we've invented a new class of biologic that changes the way drugs travel inside of your body. So, antibodies are the largest class of therapeutic in the market today. They're extraordinarily capable pieces of technology, therapeutics, but what's very hard is controlling where they go and what they do when they get to where you want them to be. And so, what we've discovered is that if you change the shape of an antibody, you change how it travels, and you change what it does when it gets there. So an example that I like to give is that if I want you to do something and I yell at you, you're not going to be very inclined to listen to what I have to say. But if I ask you nicely, you'll be more interested in actually doing what I've asked. And so therefore the structure of how you present an argument, the structure of how you design a drug completely changes the way your body reacts to it and responds to it. But changing structure of a drug is very hard. So we've invented these advanced models that allow us to change the structure of a drug very, very simply. And it's this really interesting process where what we can do is we can take an antibody that you've made, that a random pharmaceutical company has made, that we've made, and we take it at the end of its manufacturing run and we mix one of our little computationally designed proteins with it. And they attach to each other and then self assemble into these beautiful, very defined shapes. And it's the shape of that structure that changes how it travels and changes what it does when it gets to where it wants to go.
Is it a different shape for every person? That might be an embarrassingly dumb question, but since it's not my world, I guess I can just be the dumb question asker. How does the shape determine, like, is the shape for you different than the shape for me?
So ultimately, one day we would love to do this from a more personalized standpoint. But because we're doing something that's so different, what we want to focus on are therapeutic targets that are very well known, that have very well characterized liabilities. So, for example, you're making an antibody drug conjugate that goes to your eye, and it goes not only to your eye, but any patient that's being given them, it goes to their eye? Are there common patterns that if you just change their shape, will prevent it from going there? And so that's more what we're focusing on at first. High value
Interesting.
targets that have known liabilities, and almost regardless of the patient population, we can control not only how it travels to mitigate side effects, but ensure that when it gets to where you want it to go, because of its shape, it can be more effective at turning on a pathway or turning off a pathway or giving, let's say, a chemotherapeutic to the cancer.
So fascinating. And so, what does success look like if it's like, holy shit, we've arrived? Like the investors are psyched, the patients are psyched, we won.
Our goal is to get into people as fast as possible. So the absolute win is showing robust efficacy with less side effects. So that sounds like very superficial, but often how toxic a drug is considered a necessary evil in the pursuit of health. And what's really interesting about what we can do is by being able to alter the way these materials distribute, we feel that we can potentially address both. That you can keep something be very active, but also address a lot of the liabilities that almost sometimes prevent patients from sticking with the therapy as much as possible. So ideally, it would be a patient that's able to take what we've given them, but not suffer so much in the
Right.
process. That would be the ideal outcome.
Well, 100 for everyone in biosciences. Like it is such a crazy thing as you get older and you recognize like the benefits of something can also have all these crazy side effects. Like we're kind of weighing those options of like what makes the most sense. And then on top of it, if you're personalizing it, taking not just the person's age and demographic and all the things, but all the other drugs they're taking. There's so much to it. It's such a complicated field.
Exactly. And
Um,
that's why just it's really hard to change how drugs travel in the body.
yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
we view that this is one of the simplest approaches to allowing us to do this in a very, very, basic way. If we just change its shape, if we just change
yeah.
its size, can you alter the way it travels? And if you can alter the way it travels, all of a sudden that opens up a lot of opportunity because you can start doing things that other companies cannot, that other technologies cannot, because we have a lot more breadth of control because we aren't using natural proteins to do this. What we're using are computationally designed proteins that allow us to customize and tailor properties in a way that you can't do using a classic system.
Yeah, and what are the measurements of, like, breakthroughs in general? Is it and where are you relative to that happening?
So currently, we're dosing animals with our preclinical molecules right now. One of the really nice things about our technology is that our controls are always the best in class antibodies that are on the market right now. So because we're focusing on targets that are very well characterized with known clinical liabilities, we can always ask the question of not only are we different, but is the difference that we're generating significant? Does it actually
Yeah.
allow us to address both the liabilities and the effectiveness limitations that we've seen in those therapies? And then that allows us to, in a little bit more of a rapid way, because we're using a novel technology, but on a very well understood problem, to really get into people as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah, and so you've said Archon is product first, not AI first. Can you explain this distinction? And then I'm also super curious, since you're right in the center of it, kind of where you see AI fitting in overall in the biotech industry.
Yeah, so we like to call ourselves a product led platform. And that's largely because what you can't know a priori is how what you've designed on the computer, what you've made, because it's never existed before. So, how can you know what the liabilities are? How can you know what the benefits are without testing it? If you do it at a very superficial level, but you do a lot of it, then it's very hard to know if what you've done early on will scale as you get deeper and deeper into preclinical development. So what our bet was that we would make a few core bets and a couple of targets where we could start designing these molecules, these antibody cages, inject them into animals. We could characterize their manufacturability and their developability and see where they break. And by seeing where they break and where they work, that teaches us the rules of how to do it again. And that's the big part of what we wanted to focus on, was that if you focus on product and really learn the trajectory of how to repeat that again, it actually allows you to be more efficient when you actually try and do this for more than one. So in this
Yeah.
case, the reason why we're not an AI first company, even though we use a lot of generative models to create what we do, is that we first needed to understand what are the most important properties. Are we able to capture those reproducibly and robustly in the lab? And then once we can, then we scale the AI side. Because often what happens is a lot of companies invest in platform, a lot of companies invest in prediction, but the metrics for success often are unrelated to the metrics that you're initially capturing
Interesting.
with
So it's almost like inefficient. It's like we're
exactly.
focusing on, yeah, that totally makes sense. And
Because you
do you
can
guys
even
have
think of the
competitors?
we do, because not directly. So, what the field is really moving towards is that in order to solve complex biology, we need more than just an antibody. So,
Yeah.
there's this massive investment in the space called like bispecifics or multispecifics, where you're able to engage with multiple targets or the same target in multiple dimensions. But our investment is our big bet is that you actually want to move beyond this natural scaffold, which is an antibody, and more towards this unique integration of generative protein design and antibody engineering in order to create structures that give very big effects or very big differences in effects. So what that means is that often what we find is even if you make a bispecific against one target or a bispecific against another, antibodies often behave like antibodies, and it's very hard to change that behavior. And that's why you see consistent side effects, consistent liabilities, or even consistent issues associated with when they get to their target site about not generating a strong enough mechanism of action. And that's because creating even bigger effects is very hard using a natural system, because a lot of the proteins that exist in nature didn't evolve to be modified. They didn't evolve to be drugs. So we're actually asking from a more fundamental standpoint is, what do you want your drug to look like and what do you want it to do? And is there a way that we can take the best of what an antibody has to offer and augment it using computational protein as design to specifically bypass the limitations that really prevented it from being effective in the clinic?
Wow. This is next level stuff. It's like kind of crazy. And I'm curious if, well, I know that you've been very focused on you're a people person and you're hiring humans. You're also working in the space of, AI. When you look for people, I've heard that you want, emotionally intelligent and curious people because that's how you are. Is that something that you as a company defined? And how do you identify that? Like, what are your mechanisms and interview process to try to find somebody who's emotionally intelligent or curious?
So we were both fortunate when we started the company, but also intentional in the sense that when we built the team initially, we were able to get some really extraordinary anchor hires that had known reputations within the community. And so because what we hired were first people and second the technical attributes of them, it allowed reputation of our company to really spread, where what we were authentic and committed. And something that we like to say is that our definition of success is actual success. So this also plays into the notion of, are you product first or AI first? Is that everything that we do, we want to be quantitative about. We want to be tangible. We want it to be verifiable. And that's not to say if you're an AI first company, you can't verify it, but often it's you're not deep enough in actually showing that what you've done has impact in creating a drug. And so this was something that really resonated with people, is that we were very open and honest about where we were, who we were, what we could do, what we couldn't do. And they found that very refreshing, because that actually meant that they could be honest. They could actually contribute in a way to have impact on our technology and on our organization, because not only were we transparent with them, we also expected that out of them.
Yeah,
So the
that
first
makes
few
sense.
hires, I was heavily biased based on aspects of how I critique people. So I was trying to think a while ago, this is, 10, 12 years ago, what was it about people that makes me want to stay in a relationship with them? Not an intimate relationship. And I kind of came up with this like easy wordage for myself of four
Oh, yeah.
C's and
Tell
two
me.
Y's.
I'm so
So
curious.
I wanted to find people, or I value people that are all six of these things. So creative, consistent, competent, compassionate, initiative, and integrity. And I think a few of these characteristics are common, but I felt that all six are very hard to find. And consistency is a very interesting word because it's not just about showing up, but it's also showing up to be curious. So that it's not that you're going to continue to be a good job, but you're going to continue to be all those other characteristics that I had mentioned.
Yeah, those are good ones. Wait, you have to say them again, or I'm going to hit repeat and like
Creative,
listen. Creative. Okay.
consistent,
Consistent.
competent,
Competent.
compassionate, initiative, and integrity.
Wow. I love those. Are those baked into your culture or that's like your thing?
That's my thing.
Yeah.
And so a
I,
big conversation that we've started to have was, you know, there are these emergent properties of us as a company that are like very tangible. You can like almost feel them. I mean, you can almost grasp at them, but we haven't quite defined it.
yeah.
But one of the really amazing things is that each person, from my perspective on our team, shares those six qualities and more. It's obviously a lot more nuanced when you're dealing with real people as opposed to archetypes of people. But there is something where we're obviously working really, really hard right now. We're hoping to go out and fundraise in the fall. And like any
That's
new
exciting.
technology, there's always road bumps, there's always obstacles that you have to overcome. But what I find is pretty incredible is that it almost feels like people are working harder for each other than almost they are because they believe in the science. They believe in the science, but there is this camaraderie that really has been an emergent property of the types of people that we've hired because they're really there for each other. And that just makes it
Well,
so
that
much
that
more of a
speaks to your
robust system.
leadership, Jamie. That's a leadership thing too. Because you can't that I mean, I'm sure you've got some great anchor hires that you hired out of the gate. I've been in the recruiting space for 30 plus years. We won't get into the how long, like 30 years. And from a recruiting perspective, years ago, I mean, I would definitely say after COVID, people talk a lot about wanting purpose in the work that they're doing, and especially when you're solving real world problems like, medical problems and you're talking about drug related problems. I would imagine you're drawing in a certain type of person who wants to be there because they, like you said, want something measurable that they're contributing to society. But then you have to have a leader that's kind of shepherding the troops toward that mission. How would you describe, I guess, your leadership style?
Intense but vulnerable. I'm very open at admitting fault publicly. I'm
Yeah,
very open at admitting things that I don't know and what I'm
that's great.
excited about. But I'm also very intense. So the thing is that the expectations that I have of myself, I will hold you to the same expectation. So the thing is that it's just if I'm willing to admit fault, if I'm willing to apologize and you can't, then we're going to have a problem. If I'm actively thinking outside of the box and you're only thinking about this one task that you have and you're not attempting to be creative or finding alternate solutions, then we're going to have a problem. Because if I'm going to trust you, I'm also going to have to rely on the fact that you're going to be able to operate in a way that I can't. And so
Yeah, you
there's
want to be
there's a
accountable.
exactly. And so there's a huge conversation about, accountability and also not being performative. So
Hmm.
one of our employees, she had mentioned that she loves the fact how she doesn't have to work hard to do things that are irrelevant in her job description to get noticed. But what she does do is she spends a lot of time doing things that she knows that will have like impact to the organization because she knows that that's actually how she's evaluated. And so
Mm,
that's like a really good thing for me because it's cutting a lot of the BS out of it, where it's just like we don't play internal politics. If I have a
hmm.
problem with you, I'll speak about it. If you have a problem with me, you can speak about it. So I believe completely in horizontal communication, but vertical hierarchy is that I want you to feel completely comfortable in a meeting to tell me you don't agree with me. But if this is something you have to get done, you'll do it. You'll
Hmm.
listen to me. But it's also okay telling me you don't agree with that. And I
Yes,
will
that makes
respect you
sense.
more from actually giving me, you know, the respect to just like tell me exactly how you feel.
Yeah. I love that. Well, it's really about the overall mission of the business, which takes the ego out and just is like, what is our mission that we need to get accomplished here? And if there's some friction there, like we don't necessarily agree on that outcome, it's all about the North Star of where we're all trying to go, not about who did what and who gets credit for what. It's not the bullshit of the politics. It's just here's the net of what needs to get accomplished.
No, I have
Um,
absolutely no time for that. I mean, I'm
yeah,
very direct. So for me, it's like if I don't like something, I'll tell you exactly how I feel. And
yeah,
it's not ad hominem. It's not that I'm attacking your character. It's just more that just cut out the bullshit. Let's just be
yes.
honest and direct. And it makes everybody's life so much easier.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Well, I'm excited to see where you take the business, and I'll be rooting for you and watching closely. It's going to be super cool to continue to watch. My final question for you is what fuels you?
So there's two aspects: scientific curiosity and the ability to do good. I think that what doing good means is that something my grandfather said is that if you're able to see that you can have an impact on someone's life, you recognize this and don't do it, then you're probably not a good person. And I think that there's something about shepherding opportunity that's in front of you to be able to have impact on people's lives is both a calling, but also exciting. So, what fuels me is my ability to have positive impact on people's lives.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. If you'd like to check out past episodes to hear from more business leaders, go to fueltalent.com/podcast. And if you have a minute, please leave a review and rating on your favorite podcast app, or share this episode with a friend or colleague. Please share any feedback or interview suggestions for other guests by sending a message to podcast@fueltalent.com. I'm Shauna Swerland, and thanks again for listening.